We continue today with our contemplation and review of the 9 essential relations. Visualizing the one soul, uniting the soul of all our group members, those working with us subjectively and those joining us from the other side of the veil. In unison we sound the protective formula. Uniting touch, hands, light and love, while making the sign of the cross of divinity. As the soul we work in light, Ajna Center, and darkness cannot touch us, Heart Center. We take our stand within the light, Manas. We work, and from that point we never move, Buddhi. Let's pause briefly to affirm the purity of our motive as we aspire to greater understanding of Master DK's teachings and our intention to expand our conscious service under the law of love for the good, the true, the beautiful, with the guidance of the soul and protection of the higher lives focus in the heart of our group. Understanding and applying the concept of as above, so below. In this new astrology, the signs of relations. 1. The relation between male and female physical bodies, called by men the sex relation, and deemed of such paramount importance at this time. In the veil of illusion, the symbol oft engrosses attention, and that which it represents is forgotten. In the solving of this relationship will come racial initiation. And it is with this that the race is now engrossed. Relating to the heartline rays, Ray 1, Ray 3, Ray 5, and Ray 7.
This is fundamental to all creation. It is positive and negative. The polarities of electricity. Dwayne Carpenter is doing a series, Awakening the Higher Mind, where he goes into detail relating to this science and offers many beautiful illustrations and expands our consciousness in terms of that aspect of the physical science.
Two, the relation between the astral body and the physical, which, for the majority, is the control by the positive astral nature of the negative automatic physical. The physical body, the instrument of desire, is swayed and controlled by desire. Desire for physical life and desire for the acquisition of the tangible. Relating to the soft-line rays, ray 2, ray 4, ray 6.
As we know, this relation is the relation currently controlling or activated in humanity. DK gives us this tabulation, and we'll follow it along as we proceed with the relations, but let's look at it today. The human expression can and eventually will be negative to the soul. That's the goal, revealing the higher mind. It is interesting, whilst considering the pairs of opposites, the negative and positive factors, to study the following groupings. Now, we did begin by looking last time at that first one, the third, actually, lower mind being positive, the brain being negative, and the emotional nature as the field of balancing. And this results in that astral polarization. He says, you have in the above groupings 3 great fields of reflection. And these groupings can also be worked out in many ways. It must be borne in mind that, as Blavatsky points out, any such groupings, such as the 7 principles, the seeds of each of the 7 subplanes of the cosmic etheric plane, will vary according to the point in evolution of the investigator. So we really dealt with the first death, as it were, last time, being the death of desire. Now we'll look at the relation in the next couple of sessions, higher mind, which needs to become positive, to the lower mind as the negative receptive point, and the soul as the point of balance. And this leads to a second death, purification. But this time, he says, it's through vision and comes to the developed man through the activity of the subjective ruler of the planet Mercury, who is the illuminating principle, that great being, the subjective ruler of the planet Mercury, is a great being, and the illuminating principle, which releases the mind and directs the way of man through life and enables him to become aware of the divine plan, which underlies all his fiery experience. One of my colleagues along the way, who was into astrology and many of the advanced teachings, always said to us, "Where is your Mercury?" Asking us to look directly at our own charts to see the function of Mercury. And then we also learned that the way humanity thinks about Mercury as Mercury retrograde, this terrible time in humanity's cyclic experience each year, and said, actually, it is a time of rest and reflection and recapitulation. And actually, for those who are advancing along the path, Mercury retrograde can be a time of great learning in the annual cycle. So let us consider that as we move forward in this annual cycle together.
Understanding and applying the concept of as above, so below. The relation between the mind and brain.
Just to remind us again, in relation to that first essential, we are in the process of a racial initiation as part of the 5th subrace, the 5th root race. And we were moving into the 6th subrace. This is a long period of time, as you can see by what Philip Lindsay postulates as these hundreds of thousands of years, and that we will, by the end of this 5th subrace, have achieved perfected intellect, the development of the principle of mind. And just to remember that a principle is a germ of awareness, according to DK, carrying all the potentiality of full consciousness on some particular level of divine activity, and that is the plane of mind. It is that which makes knowledge and conscious response to environment possible. It is that which connotes a sequential and unrolling sensitive activity, resulting in divine understanding possible and inevitable. So when we think about the hundreds of thousands of years and the different cycles, consider this the unrolling of the sensitive activity of the mind and the fifth principle, the goal of this fifth root race.
We continue with the third relation. The relation between the mind and the brain, which constitutes the problem of the more advanced men and races, and of which the vast system of schools, colleges, and universities indicate the importance. Much progress in this relation has been made during the past 50 years, and the work of the psychologist marks its highest point. When this is understood, the mind will be regarded as the positive factor, and the other two aspects of the form nature will respond receptively. They will be the automatons of the mind. This third relation relates to the hard line rays 1, 3, 5, and 7.
So I think you have a better understanding of our path in the culmination of this fifth root race, fifth subrace, and the development of the principle of mind as perfected intellect. The goal, as we are noticing the end of our current civilization, so focused on mind, and the transition into the sixth root race, 5.6, the sixth subrace, as we move along as humanity, rolling and unrolling sensitive activity, resulting in divine understanding, possible and inevitable.
Wherein, therefore, lies the macrocosmic correspondence? Where's the analogy in the solar system? An indication I give here. In the direct alignment of certain planets in the process of systemic evolution with each other and with the sun comes logoic or divine alignment. Think this out, but one word of warning I give. Seek not to work out hypotheses of alignment based on the physical planets. The truth lies not there. Only 3 of the physical planets, and those 3 in etheric matter, enter into the final alignment that marks the attainment by the logos of the cosmic egoic consciousness, which is his goal of attainment. Of these 3, the Earth is not one, but Venus has her place, corresponding to the emotional permanent Adam. Further still, the alignment may be progressed. In the alignment of our entire solar system with the system of Sirius lies a still more remote goal. It is a point far ahead in time, but holds hid the secret of the greater cycle.
This may be why DK tells us that the new astrology, the science of relations, is not really related to the current charts that we have for individuals, and that this science has far to advance before we can begin to look at the current thinking of modern astrologers even, and begin to understand as esoteric astrology evolves, and it is, as he says, the astrology for group rather than individual. This is an important teaching in relation to our looking at as above, so below. In the beginning of the Glamour book, he tells us that the study of symbols conceptually carries us inward from the brain to the mind into the realm of ideas. It sweeps into focused activity the mental apparatus. And he tells us that then we become aware of the concept or idea which the sign or symbol embodies. We comprehend its meaning, and for what it stands. We grasp the purpose for which the form has been brought into manifestation. So in this session, we're going to use a lot of his tabulations and some adapted symbols as we progress in understanding the relation of brain and mind. One we looked at before in our study of astrology and esoteric astrology and opening to the energies is this particular diagram 4, and we'll look at it again in relation to other signs, but in terms of Aries, it's particularly important. And for us today, looking at Mercury, because Mercury is regarded as embodying both aspects of the mental principle, the expression of the concrete and the abstract mind of God. So if we study this, reflect on it, contemplate, meditate on it, and we look at the descent of the first ray energies through Aries to the sun, or actually it's from the triangle of Aries, Leo, and Capricorn to the sun, and then to the 7 sacred planets, we see Mercury there, and the importance of Mercury emerges as we go through the annual cycle from Aries to Gemini to Virgo to Scorpio. And they all blend and merge in the influence of Mercury into Shambhala. So hold that thought and maybe jot some things down as we go through these teachings today, things you want to remember. Go back and consider. For on earth, we are in the process of transmutation. We'll look in greater depth in Taurus at this particular alignment, the flow of love wisdom. For as he says, further still, the alignment may be progressed in alignment of our entire solar system with the system of Sirius, and this lies as a more remote goal. And we know that it's mentioned often that humanity, the majority, will go to Sirius for training. We need to consider that as a far distant goal for the greater cycle of 25,000 years ruled by Pisces. We're just now entering the Aquarian age, a lesser cycle within that greater cycle. But it gives us the rationale, the reason that the solar plexus must be lifted to the heart center, transmuting personal desire to the heart center of the discipleship group, where love can flourish and consciousness expand. We'll go through these quickly, but just to note that Sirius works in a 7-fold manner through the 7 rays and is always a factor in terms of the energies that are entering into Shambhala, the Lord of the world, that logoic subplane of the cosmic etheric plane, which is the location of the brain of the logos, or the mind of the logos, excuse me. And we see the progression down to the planetary throat center, which is humanity at the present time. And that humanity, he says, is in reality the brain of the planetary deity. And its many units, all the units of humanity, being analogous to the brain cells in the human apparatus. That may be a concept that you want to return to and consider. He tells us the members of the hierarchy represent those who have achieved peace and quiescence and can be impressed. Aspirants and disciples represent those brain cells which are beginning to fall into the larger divine rhythm. those members of humanity, disciples and aspirants, are learning the nature of responsiveness. And the mass of men are like the millions of unused brain cells, which the psychologists and scientists tell us we possess but do not employ. So we think about the mass of humanity as those cells in the mind of the Logos, not currently aligned with logoic intent. And our duty to become more and more responsive to the divine rhythm. The monad, the triangle of will, love, and intelligence, energizes the spiritual triad, and we work to become more and more responsive. DK says purpose itself is only an energy released within the confines of the council chamber of Shambhala. There it must take shape. One of our colleagues in the Moria Federation defines it as ordered purpose that emerges through the atmic plane into the Buddhic plane and involves, as DK says, the Buddhic or intuitional plane to which we aspire to be responsive. This relates to the fourth initiation, but even more importantly, it concerns the throat center. It concerns humanity. And even maybe more important for aspirants and disciples, it concerns the light upon the path. And we can look at the relationship to the monastic permanent atom, where the causal body is located in its highest point at the fourth initiation, before it is destroyed and no longer needed. And the initiate emerges into life in the soul as the soul on the Buddhic plane. So how can I, in my small sphere, be of service? He tells us, we've talked about this before, thinking this teaching into the minds of the public, into the unawakened brain cells, and expressing before our fellow men the teaching that it imparts by a life conforming with the teaching. And in that way, our service becomes real. For as we're told, energy follows thought, and the eye, the spiritual eye that awakens in us and becomes the eventual functioning ajna center, that eye directs the energy and involves the physical plane, relates to the first initiation, which is the first initiation for the majority of humanity, concerns the ajna center and its development and the so-called third eye. So that the personality as a mental unit, as the mind, reflects the threefold soul. That soul vehicle expressing the will to love as love, being that synthetic, inclusive grasp of the life and needs of all beings. And it leads eventually to the opening of those synthesis petals, the inner petals of the egoic lotus that surround the jewel. And that occurs as we eventually advance after the third initiation, but can be seen reflecting in the threefold soul vehicle when we work in group formation and when we serve, having awakened the Antakarana and thinking of that as our goal as a group, to continue that, to express those three aspects of mind in our service. Master DK instructs us to follow 3 steps in using symbols. First, investigate the symbol. And then from one progressive stage of awareness to another, include the entire field covered by the symbol. and intuitive perception of the symbol emerges, and you will see it everywhere in the divine manifestation. So I encourage you to use the symbols, the tabulations, the images he gives us, and use the symbols on the physical plane. And with the right adaptation, we will see and recognize purpose, and it will lead to the magnetization of the symbol with the needed quality through which the idea can make its presence felt, in order that the intuited, qualified idea may find proper form on the physical plane. And that's really the reason to use and adapt and find yourself in the symbols and find our group in the symbols that DK gives us. And then use these in meditation.
Letter 2. Importance of meditation. 1. It results in egoic contact and alignment. 2. It brings about a state of equilibrium. 3. It stabilizes vibration. And 4. It assists in a transference of polarization. To the onlooking hierarchy, it is apparent that the divine fire is permeating and warming and radiating throughout the causal body, and that the ego is becoming ever more conscious on his own plane and ever more interested, via the permanent atoms, in the life of the personality. The physical brain of the personality is not yet aware of the difference between inherent mental capacity and the directed impress of the indwelling ego, but the time is becoming ripe for a change of some kind, and evolution is moving with rapidity. The fourth period approaches, that is, the fourth essential relation, which we take up next month, that of soul personality. I would here sound a warning. All this proceeds not in ordered sections, if so I may term it. It proceeds as proceeds the greater system, with constant overlapping and with parallelism due to the inherent rate of the spirit or monad, to cyclic changes, to diversity of forces playing astrologically, and oft from unknown cosmic centers upon the palpitating life within the atoms.
Let us keep that in mind, that last portion, is many students who have a strong fifth ray mind would like to see things really cut and dried in a particular order. And it's really important that we recognize the constant overlapping, particularly in group work. And also the cyclic changes that we learn about in terms of what the current energies are that are seeking and are entering and influencing on a planetary level, on a national level, astrologically. So we move forward. Create your own symbols for the first relation, the second relation, the third relation. Create symbols that make sense to you. And then I encourage you to consider making symbols in terms of groups that you are working with, aligned with. Think about vibration, light, sound, color in relation to the groups. For your family, those close to you, your spiritual family, the physical body, the astral body, the mental body of that group. What's the color? What's the note or sound? As that group integrates and develops an integrated personality that can merge with the soul of the group. If you're working with the soul of nations, work. The soul of Canada has worked in relation to defining those physical, astral, and mental bodies uniting as an integrated personality. I think this has a recording attached to it.
Each life tends to a greater stability, but seldom is the threefold personality yet to be found lined up, if so I may put it, with the causal consciousness. Temporary moments occur when this is the case, and when, in moments of highest aspiration and for purposes of unselfish endeavor, the higher and the lower form align direct. Usually the emotional body, through violent emotion and vibration, or a fluctuating restlessness, is continuously out of alignment. Thus the necessity of our service to dissipate glamour. Where the emotional body may be momentarily aligned, then the mental body acts as an obstruction through illusion, preventing the percolation down from the higher to the lower, and so to the physical brain. It takes many lives of strenuous endeavor before the emotional body can be stilled, and a mental body built that will act as a filter and not as an impediment. Even when this has been somewhat accomplished, and the emotional body is stabilized and a pure reflector, and the mental body serves the purpose of the sensitive plate and discriminator, and the intelligent explainer of the higher imparted truth, even then, I say, it takes much discipline and many lives of effort to align the two at the same time. When that is done, the control of the physical brain and its final alignment remain to be effected, so that it may act as a direct receiver and transmitter of the imparted teaching, and may reflect with accuracy the higher consciousness.
In general, most human beings in incarnation today have a third ray or seventh ray etheric physical body or brain. Some characteristics of the third ray etheric physical body and brain. Force is adaptation. Energy is development. Action is evolution. The third ray is the personality ray of the planetary logos. It demonstrates physical strength and stamina and adaptability. Some characteristics of the seventh ray etheric physical body and brain. Force is incantation. Energy is magic. Action is ritual. The seventh ray also focuses or, quote, grounds the first ray, end quote, and leads to the power direction which is given them. It demonstrates sensitivity to the environing conditions and formality. The etheric body, the body of vitality, is the organ whereby personality or soul expression becomes evidenced upon the physical plane. Its potency is that which evokes the physical form. Most of the vehicles have a dual capacity, invocation and evocation. They also have a third function. They ground or focus energy, thus producing a point of tension, of crisis and an interlude, prior to the process of transmission. Ponder on these words.
Looking out into the field of endeavor, the spiritualizing of our activities, Next month, we'll look at what is apparent as the first ray physical body and brain. For that was apparent in Master DK's disciples, particularly those that were working in the seed group telepathic communicators. And we'll think about, in relation to that relationship of soul personality expression on the physical plane, how we notice that first ray influence in relation to their particular efforts on the physical plane. We also need to note that there's a close connection between the spleen and the top of the head in connection with this etheric body, and we'll look at that further. The organ of the spleen, he says, has an interesting correspondence to the umbilical cord, which attaches an infant to the mother for purposes of nourishment, and which is separated at birth. So how might we, and ponder on this in the coming month, how might we visualize that relationship for humanity in relation to the etheric body of the planetary logos, that umbilical cord for humanity as the brain to the head center, Shambhala. Take some time to ponder on that in the coming weeks. And think about what carries the data or sends the messages. Because as humanity, we are so ensconced, so into media, into these virtual ways of communicating. How is the data? How are the messages sent? You could say it very simply that it's through the synapses, which are firing electrical impulses in a network of connectivity from atom to atom, from cell to cell, creating pathways, a kind of circuitry for the messages to the neurons, working in harmony when we are healthy and when there is true health in the aura, that activate our movement, emotions, directions, these all expressing life, quality, and appearance. The etheric physical, the basic functions of our neurological system, governing instinct, the will to be, to survive. Below often our level of awareness or lowest consciousness. Think of that in terms of humanity now, what is happening that is focused on awakening instinctual reactions in humanity. The astral, emotional functions of the neurological system governing our emotional response to our environment or relationships, the desire to satisfy personal needs developing into desire to be part of the tribal instincts that are so noted by the media today. The level of awareness or primary consciousness of humanity, which is astrally polarized, the desire to protect one's own interests, the desires to be loved, the desire to control, the desire to create, that hopefully becomes aspiration. The concrete mental sheath, the functions of the neurological system governing the will to manifest, governing the executive functions. What are leaders doing at this time for humanity? There becomes that desire to achieve, the aspiration to dominate in some cases, the desire for power over self and the desire for power over others, the decision-making that is going on in the brain cells of humanity. Seeking a level of awareness or higher consciousness is part of that. The ability to predict, to visualize, to plan, to organize, that eventually becomes inspiration and takes us to the higher mind, the sheath of the brain of humanity that functions in its neurological system, in our neurological system, as responsive to higher ideals and ideas, to the higher evolutions, to the spiritual vibration and light, to achieve illumination. Consider those sheaths. How is the data moving through, connecting on all those levels?
When we sound these words of Roberto Assagioli, I have a body. I am not my body. I have emotions. I am not my emotions. I have a mind. I am not my mind. We are lifting the attention within the united spheres to the highest point, the deepest point of life within your being, the soul. And then affirm soul control by sounding the soul mantram. I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design.
Sound a silent Om from the highest point of the head center to affirm this goal. Keep it in mind at any point in your day-to-day when you need to remind yourself that is the goal for all of us. As part of the brain, humanity, those cells that are part of the brain of the planetary logos. To shift the focus from the lower to the higher. Create your own visualization, create your own symbol of that, moving from the physical body and integrating into the astral and integrating into the mental body, and align those with the soul mantra. Let the focus on those bodies fall away. And continuously attempt to think into the causal body. And achieve alignment with the soul vehicle to eventually achieve mental polarization. For the vehicle of the higher self, the average causal body is on the third subplane of the mental plane. As DK says, this is a point not sufficiently recognized, and we should ponder on it. For over the course of the initiations, from the first to the second to the third, the causal body moves from the third, the point of spiritual discernment, to the second, response to group vibration, and then finally to the third, spiritual telepathy, which is the first, the highest subplane of the mental plane, where we have access to the monastic permanent atom and all that is available to us in the causal body from all the lives. In the aligning of the three vehicles, the physical, the emotional, and the lower mind body within the causal periphery, and they're stabilizing there by an effort of the will, that the real work of the ego or higher self in any particular incarnation can be accomplished. DK tells us further that the great thinkers of the race, the true exponents of lower mind, are fundamentally those whose three lower bodies are aligned, that is to say, those whose mental body holds the other two in circumspect alignment. The mental body then is the direct communication, unobstructed and free from interference, straight through to the physical brain. And there's the notation. You'll see what we usually see in the symbology using esoteric healing. This depiction of the chakra sheaths is slightly different. But whether it is inner to outer, outer to inner, it is not on any of the three-dimensional planes that we realize. It is on that highest multiple dimensional field that this occurs.
When the alignment is fourfold, and when the three above-mentioned bodies are aligned with the body of the higher self, the causal or egoic body, and held steady within its circumference, then the great leaders of the race, those who emotionally and intellectually sway mankind, can be seen working. Then the inspirational writers and dreamers can bring down their inspirations and dreams. And then the synthetic and abstract thinkers can transfer their conceptions to the world of form. It is right through a question of an unimpeded channel. Study therefore in this connection, and when time permits, physical coordination. Then to physical coordination add emotional stability, and you have the two vehicles functioning as one. When the coordination extends to the mental body, the threefold lower man is reaching his apotheosis and has rung most of the changes in the world of form. The four lesser brain centers, solar plexus in the head center, splenic center in the head center, the sacral center in the head center, and the base center in the head center, are functioning at high vibration in the man of highly coordinated personality. For the average man, this alignment occurs only at intervals, in moments of stress, in hours of needed humanitarian effort, and in times of intensest aspiration. Abstraction of a more or less degree has to enter in before the ego takes continued notice of the personality or lower self. When that abstraction involves the emotions, is based in the mentality, and contacts the physical brain, then alignment is commencing.
This is one of the reasons why we introduced the law of abstraction in the assisting transitions meditations, so that we could become familiar with it. For he says we must learn increasingly to work under the law of abstraction, that influence of that law. And most people focus on it in relation to physical death, which is, as he says, of slight importance in comparison to its emphasis in connection with the world of thought. And that involves the severing of connection with specific lines of thought. And this may refer to the preconceived need, which may dawn increasingly upon the disciple as he draws closer to the ashram. Consider the thoughts that you've had to let go of. Not just lower thoughts of desire, but thoughts in which you've been trained and there's been an impress on your brain to follow a certain pattern of thought. And consider how you can allow yourself to move out of that, to control that brain, and move to the higher mind. And this does involve sometimes a termination of an outgoing affection towards a person or group of persons upon the astral plane. Many people in the teachings develop a new relation to family, to friends, to group as they move into the higher mind.
The lower concrete mind expresses itself most completely through the fifth ray of concrete science, reflecting the lower phase of the will aspect of divinity and summarizing within itself all knowledge as well as the egoic memory. This lower concrete mind is related to the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus and is capable of pronounced soul illumination, proving eventually to be the searchlight of the soul. It can be brought under control through the processes of concentration. It is transient in time and space. Through conscious creative work, it can be related to the monasic permanent Adam or to the abstract mind.
We use this in the development of the searchlight that we utilize first as individuals and then later the group searchlight that connects the son of mind, soul, the light of mind, and the light of matter, the brain. We develop the ability to utilize that searchlight in relation to our service in the dissipation of glamour.
In the fourth kingdom, the human, it is the energy of the fourth ray, which, cooperating with the first ray, eventually brings synthesis. There is a close relation between the highest center, the head center, and that at the base of the spine. This fourth type of energy thus expresses itself in cooperation with the first type because we are still Atlantean in our polarization, and that civilization was the fourth in order. It is very largely the work done in our fifth civilization, our present Aryan race, which will, in cooperation with the fifth principle of the mind, bring a shift into a higher level of consciousness. This will produce a harmonizing of all the centers through an act of the will, intellectually and intelligently applied, with the objective of producing harmony. This point warrants thought.
And this point requires patience from all of us. This intensity of the shift in civilizations, of all the activities of humanity, causes an undue stress on many who are seeking the higher way. Focusing on the triangles and actually formulating triangles of your own to ground in these times is quite important. This is just to remind us of where average man is focalized, and that we reach as disciples and initiates, we connect with the heart center of the mass of men. And then with developing men, we continuously and still use the heart center as their particular centers are opening. We develop the Ajna center and become part eventually of the new group of world servers, the Ajna center of our planet, as humanity is the throat center and as Shambhala is the head center. Just to remind us the importance of Mercury, this whole progression utilizing the cycles of Mercury through every transition and the higher vibration of Mercury that you find within your own chart and within the charts of the groups in which you are serving. And use the cycles. Use the time when Mercury is in retrograde as points to pause, time to reflect, and to exercise patience and persistence. So, have you thought about what you need to remember from what we've looked at so far in terms of learning and integrating in relation to this third essential? And I noted on this particular slide also what we read before, that we need to listen to DK's warning that this proceeds in the greater system, constant overlapping, due to the inherent ray of the monad. Keep in mind the spiritual triad that we're attempting to align with, and the use of discrimination through the mental unit and developing that within humanity. And the role of the monad in energizing that spiritual triad, involving the third eye. Third eye is the monad is the third eye of the planetary logos. And so the third eye of man, we'll look at that in detail in Taurus when we do the opening to the energies, involving the mental plane, and takes us from the first to the second and to the third initiation. It concerns the head center and the light of purpose. So ideas stream from hierarchy into the higher mental plane through the receptivity of the causal body, the receptivity that we develop through discrimination and connectivity in group to the soul of the group. Consider every opportunity for the fifth root race, fifth sub-race, is to achieve knowledge and attain that highest point of intellectual development, which, if we look at the chart that DK gives us, there is a correlation to the soul vehicle with where the causal body of most human beings is currently located. The fifth, third subplane is also, because the numbers do reverse, 5-5. So there's a focus on sacrifice knowledge petal, that petal opening for humanity. For those of us on the path, sacrifice love. And then for those who are in higher, more advanced states, sacrifice petal opens. And these vortices are then connected in a pure channel, which is a channel of will, spiritual will, from the physical permanent atom, astral permanent atom, to the mental unit and to the monastic permanent atom, and the achievement of mental polarization as the goal. So if we consider if and how the essential relations can correspond to progress along the path, we could look at this particular diagram that DK gives us, the funnels, and look at the development of the antakarana that could be seen as linking the brain cells down here at the bottom, humanity, through the first initiation, second initiation, third initiation, fourth initiation, on up the scale through that second, entering that second funnel of accepted discipleship, and relate it to the essential relations that we'll consider throughout the remainder of this particular annual cycle this year.
Stream or flow of ideas and ideals from the hierarchy. There is at least sensitivity to 7 groups of ideas and their resultant ideals, and if it were no more than that, the hierarchy is so far fluid and pliable. But it is far more than just this, for to the members of the hierarchy, the idea and its effects are not only interpreted in terms of human thought forms and human idealism, but they are also to be contacted and studied in their relation to the mind of God Himself and to the planetary kingdoms. These ideas come from and they emanate from the Buddhic plane, which is seldom open to the consciousness of the average disciple, and certainly is not open to the contact of the average idealist.
And to and through the 7 groups as they constitute the active hierarchy. The receptivity of the causal body established through the building of the antakarana and the unfolding of the petals of the egoic lotus links soul, mind, and brain, allowing for that connectivity to the Buddhic plane. And the result is flashes or brief awareness of the higher ideals, vision, and eventually flashes of healing from the Buddhic plane, recorded in the mind of the initiate.
First, the stage of mental recording. The clarity and the accuracy of this recording will be dependent upon the condition of the channel of reception, the antakarana. In this recording, curiously enough, a certain element of time enters in. It is not the time as you know it upon the physical plane, which is but the registration by the brain of passing events. It is the higher mental correspondence to time. Into this I cannot here enter, as the theme is too abstruse. For time in this connection is related to distance, to descent, to focus, and to the power to record.
Is this something that you want to make note of? We have read it before. It's been part of other orientations to the different energies, but particularly in relation to this essential mind-brain.
Second, the stage of brain reception. The accuracy of this reception is dependent on the quality of the physical brain cells, upon the polarization of the thinking man in the head center, and the freedom of the brain cells from all emotional impression. The difficulty lies here that the receiving aspirant or the focused thinker is always aware emotionally of the descent of the higher impression and of the consequent clarification of the theme of his thought. This must, however, be recorded by a perfectly quiescent astral vehicle, and therefore you will see one of the main objectives of true meditation.
What might we note in terms of our meditation as a group? Achieving that completely, perfectly quiescent astral vehicle in order to receive, as a group, impressions.
Third, the stage of recognized interpretation. This is an exceedingly difficult phase. Interpretation is dependent upon many factors: the educational background, the point reached in evolution, the mystical or occult approach of the disciple to the center of truth, his freedom from the lower psychism, his essential humility, which plays a major part in proper understanding, and his personality decentralization. In fact, the character in its entirety is involved in this important matter of correct interpretation.
Quite a high stage to have reached for any human being, and attainable on the path of initiation.
I would here remind you that few idealists are personally in touch with the idea which has given birth to the idealism. They are only in touch with the human interpretation of the idea as formulated by some disciple or intuitive. A very different thing.
The third relation, the relation between the mind and the brain, which constitutes the problem of the more advanced men and races, and of which the vast system of schools, colleges, and universities indicate the importance. Much progress in this relation has been made during the past 50 years, and even more in the ensuing 50 years. And the work of the psychologists marks its highest point. And since the publication of this treatise, amazing advances in science and technology. When this is understood, the mind will be regarded as the positive factor, and the other two aspects of the form nature, etheric physical and astral, will respond receptively. They will be the automatons of the mind.
So what's required of us to better understand this third relation, particularly that it is a problem? We must overcome hindrances, be self-forgetful, be harmless, be sama, which is a word used that indicates activity of a higher note, the midpoint between what on the horizontal plane is right and wrong. To be sama in all thoughts and actions, serve humanity, to be group in mind and spirit, to use occult meditation and always stand at the midpoint, the way that reaches out in two directions, therefore achieving mental polarization. What do we have to do? Build the individual antakarana and work that into true awareness of the group antakarana. So what now can you note to remember and learn and integrate in relation to the mental body? I'll refer you all back to a series that Nicole did in 2021. It was all in relation to esoteric healing, but there's a lot of valuable information in that series. And it is available to members through the Esoteric Healing Community website. So what connects and relates the parts and the sparks of life within the whole, the brain, the concrete mind, and the higher mind? It is light.
Individuality within the one great whole. Represented here, a triangular crystal snowflake. The Son of Mind. This is the soul itself, governed by the second aspect of all the seven rays. A point I would ask you seriously to register. It reflects the lower phase of the love aspect of divinity and summarizes in itself the results of all accumulated knowledge, which is wisdom, illuminated by the light of the intuition. Another way of expressing this is to describe it as love, availing itself of experience and knowledge. It expresses itself most fully through the love petals of its innate being. Through dedicated and devoted service, it brings the divine plan into activity in the three worlds of human accomplishment. It is therefore related to the second aspect of the spiritual triad and is brought into functioning activity through meditation. It then controls and utilizes for its own spiritual ends the consecrated personality via the illumined mind referred to above. It is internal in time and space. Will to unification through Jupiter, ray 2. Will to unify, will to synthesize, will to produce coherence and mutual attraction, will to establish relationships.
Andrea, if you're available to voice, would you do this for us?
Sure. The abstract mind. This reveals itself most completely under the influence of the first ray of will or power, reflecting the higher aspect of the will of divinity or of the Atmic principles. It summarizes in itself, when fully developed, the purpose of deity, and thus becomes responsive for the emergence of the plan. It energizes the will petals until such time as the eternal life of the soul is absorbed into that which is neither transient nor eternal, but which is endless, boundless, and unknown. It is brought into conscious functioning through the building of the Antakarana. This radiant rainbow bridge unites the illumined personality, focused in the mind-body, motivated by the love of the soul, with the monad or with the one life, and thus enables the divine manifesting Son of God to express the significance of the words, God is love, and God is a consuming fire. This fire, energized by love, has burnt out all personality qualities, leaving only a purified instrument, colored by the soul ray, and no longer necessitating the existence of a soul body. The personality has by this time completely absorbed the soul, or to put it perhaps more accurately, both soul and personality have been fused and blended into one instrument for the use of the one life. In reviewing the fourth essential relation next month, we will look in greater depth into this relation of soul and personality.
The relation that we touch in the fourth essential relationship, we'll look at in relation to our solar system as well. And keep in mind that in actuality, the achievement of this state really relates to the ninth essential relation that DK says in A Treatise on White Magic, we are not yet ready to deal. we'll begin to find the interconnectedness. So remember, Mercury again is our link to the mental principle, concrete and abstract mind of God. So let's consider some of the important teachings about occult meditation, because it can help us understand the problem that this relation is. He says that meditation should have the effect of bringing all three bodies more completely under the control of the ego or soul, and lead to a coordination and alignment, to a rounding out and a symmetrical development that will make a man of real use to the great ones. And in group formation may assist us in better understanding the relation of mind and brain, because it is all about proper handling of energy and force. Let's remember what DK tells us, that energy is subtler and more potent than the force upon which it makes impact or establishes contact. The force is less potent, but it is anchored. And in those last two words, we have the key to the problem of the relationship of energies. That as force, it is anchored, even though it's less potent. So in moving together, the importance of balancing and managing our energies and forces as aspirants, disciples, and initiates serving in group formation. If you could read at this time and would like to, just unmute yourself. We'll go through some of the teachings in relation to the mental body that were given in Letters on Occult Meditation.
I can read.
Thank you.
I begin with the mental body as it is for the student of meditation, the one that is the center of his effort and the one that controls the two lower bodies. The true student seeks to draw his consciousness away from his physical body and away from the emotional body into the realms of thought or into the lower mind body. Having achieved that much, he seeks then to transcend that lower mind and to become polarized in the causal body, using the Antakarana as the channel of communication between the higher and the lower, the physical brain being then but the quiescent receiver of that which is transmitted from the ego or the higher self, and later from the threefold spirit, the triad. The work to be done necessitates a working from the periphery inwards and a consequent centralization. Having achieved that centralization and focused in that stable center with the solar plexus and the heart quiet, a point within the head, one of the three major head centers, becomes the center of consciousness, the ray of a man's ego deciding which that center will be.
In many traditions, this is described as the cave in the head, that point in the head. Would you go on?
Man, when meditating, aims at two things. A, at the formation of thoughts, at the bringing down to the concrete levels of the mental plane of abstract ideas and intuitions. This is what might be termed meditation with seed. B, at the aligning of the ego and at the creation of that vacuum betwixt the physical brain and the ego, which results in the divine outpouring and the consequent shattering of the forms and subsequent liberation. This might be termed meditation without seed. At a certain period in evolution, the two blend, the seed is dropped, and the vacuum is then created, not so much between the higher and the lower vehicles as between them and the intuitional plane or the plane of harmony.
And we'll deal with this in greater depth in another essential that I believe is essential 5 and essential 6. This activity, which does result in this shattering of the forms. So it's a very important note here that we use occult meditation. We use 1 and 2, and then we do the meditation at the full moon, and then meditation 4, which we are using, which is our connectivity with hierarchy. And then the next stage is to do the building of the Antakarana. And this year, Michael's meditations, which I've been posting each month, practice that orientation so clearly, the orientation along the Antakarana and the connectivity with hierarchy. So we won't go much further than meditation with seed later this year, because it's the next step, having already established that interconnectivity and familiarity along that line of the Antakarana. And that, suffice to say, as he says, some people by their sheer strength of will reach a point in meditation where they directly inhibit the processes of the lower mind. But we need to think about this in a couple of different ways which relate to the problems that come. So if you picture the mental body as an ovoid surrounding the physical body and extending much beyond it, and if you realize that through that ovoid are constantly circulating thought forms of various kinds, the content of the man's mind and the thoughts of his environing associates. We all know this. It happens all the time when we're in life. So that the mental egg is colored by predominant attractions and diversified by many geometrical forms, all in a state of flux or circulation. He says we may get some idea of what he means. So that is really the first stage, and it is so difficult now because we are bombarded with these thoughts, and it's bombarding the mental egg, the sphere, the mental body. So when we proceed to quiet that mental body by inhibiting or suppressing all movement, you arrest those thought forms within the mental ovoid. You stop the circulation, and it can bring about serious consequences. So this, I think, is one of the most important things from Letters on Occult Meditation. The goal is never to stop those thoughts, to eradicate them. That's part of our life. That's part of what we are doing, is to still the mental body and to deal with those thoughts that come from our environing associates and come from the crises that surround us and the work environments and the family situations, all that surround us and that we are bombarded with on social media. Because the inhibition has a direct effect upon the physical brain and is the cause of much of the fatigue complained of after a period of meditation. And if persisted in, it may lead to disaster. So all beginners do it more or less, and until you learn to guard against it, it will stultify progress and retard development. The results may indeed be more serious. And DK does recommend, and not just for beginners, but I think all of us who are working so deeply in group, that we limit our meditation time and not force ourselves to meditate when we are in environments with this extreme distraction. So the student, having withdrawn his consciousness onto the mental plane at some point within the brain, sound the sacred word gently 3 times. Why don't we do that now? Picture the breath sent forth as a clarifying, expurgating force that in its progress onward sweeps away the thought forms circulating within the mental ovoid. After having sounded the 3 ohms gently, realize that the mental body is free and clear of thought forms. Then raise the vibration as high as may be and aim at lifting it clear of the mental body into the causal body, into the soul. I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design. Bringing about the direct action of the ego upon the 3 lower vehicles. DK goes on to say that as long as we can keep the consciousness high, and as long as we can hold the vibration, that is that of the ego on its own plane, the mental body will be held in a state of equilibrium. It will hold no lower vibration. It will not hold the vibration circulating in the environment. For with those 3 ohms, we've anchored soul force and circulate then that force through the mental ovoid, permitting no extraneous geometrical units to find entrance. And the dangers of inhibition will be offset. By using this technique, he tells us that the mental matter will, in process of time, become so attuned to the higher vibration that in due course, that vibration will become stable. And it will automatically throw off all that is lower and undesirable. So note to self, if you find yourself being swept up with those outer thought forms, the environmental pressures, practice this above all else until you feel that you can draw on it at a time when it comes to you, for we are all developing telepathy. We all really have astral telepathy. We're developing mental telepathy, which activates as mind to mind. So even in a situation like this, when we're in group formation together studying, extraneous thoughts can enter. Just practice, allowing the soul to control. When in group conditions, even with those who are advanced along the path, you may find that you need to activate soul control in that environment, to pause, to bring yourself back into soul alignment. And it at times may be that you even need to, in some cases, go off audio, if that's what is clicking you into focus on those lower thoughts. Be your own self, be your own soul in all these interactions. He says it's our task now to deal briefly with the dangers that attend the practice of meditation as they manifest in the physical body. These dangers, like so much else in the logoic scheme, assume a threefold nature, attacking three departments of the physical body. They show themselves in the brain, in the nervous system, and in the sex organs. It's needless to point out the reason why he deals first with the dangers of mental and emotional bodies. It was necessary for many of the perils besetting the dense vehicle find their commencement on the subtler planes and are only the outer manifestations of inner evils. And this has been said in other words that have been given to us through esoteric healing, that particular volume, and have been part of Nicole's teachings on esoteric healing. But we need to look at those that show themselves in the brain and the nervous system very briefly. And I'll do this rapidly because you can go back and look at it again and study it if it's of importance to you. But it is the cautionary tale about why we do not do intensive meditations over and over again during a day and force ourselves, because the result can be congestion, which causes a suffusion of the blood vessels and a consequent strain upon the delicate brain tissue. It may result in permanent injury and oftentimes does. It shows in the initial stages as numbness and fatigue, so watch for that. And eventually it can result in insanity. We won't deal with that directly, but it does happen for those who are persisting in unwise pressure and seeking to arouse the sacred fire through breathing exercises and similar practices. And it's a danger to the nervous system. The troubles connected with the nervous system are more frequent than those attacking the brain, such as insanity or the disruption of the brain tissue, and almost all who undertake meditation are conscious of an effect in the nervous system. Sometimes it takes the form of sleeplessness, of excitability, of a strained energy and restlessness that permit of no relaxation, or of an irritability that has been foreign perhaps to the disposition until meditation was pursued. And I think that if you think about your group work, you may note that others, if not yourself, have noted sleeplessness, excitability, a strained energy, restlessness, or an irritability. Another consequence is a nervous reaction, twitching of the limbs, the fingers, the eyes. It can also result in depression or a lowering of the vitality, and of many individual modes of showing tension and nervousness, differing according to nature and temperament. So he gives us many reasons for caution. Note these within yourself. If you note them within a group member, pull back from the time spent in meditation, because it does not bode well. As we continue to contemplate Master DK's teachings, standing steady in the light, and yet protecting the vehicles from overstimulation and overuse, pause now and say, what have I learned about my own equipment? What can I do that will assure that I'll proceed at the pace and the rhythm of my own soul? And then what can we do as a group to balance and manage as a group? Andrea, would you read this for us, please? Or Cindy?
A group of disciples must be distinguished by pure reason, which will steadily supersede motive, merging eventually into the will aspect of the monad, its major aspect. It is, technically speaking, Shambhala in direct relation with humanity. Shambhala, the mind of God, the head center of the planetary logos. How are these relations being utilized in creative expression? In relation to the brain of the planetary logos, humanity. As humanity develops soul consciousness, the physical brain being then but the quiescent receiver of that which is transmitted from the ego or higher self, and later from the threefold spirit, the triad.
Our goal. Would you continue, Cindy?
We must look upon humanity itself as an integrated entity, as a being, as a life in form. In this unified form life, every human being is a cell, and the 7 races constitute the 7 major centers, with the polarization shifting ever into the higher centers and the lower centers fading away into quiescence, until the time comes when all of the 7 will be coordinated and energized at the end of the age. We might here make the following suggestions. Note this word, as to the relation between the races and the centers in the body of humanity. Fifth root race, the throat center, creative power, the present, occult.
So we, as part of the 5th root race, are part of this throat center of humanity. At the closure of this 5th root race, the mind, the principle of the mind will have been developed through the occult processes. And the 6th root race will be the development of intuition.
We must look upon humanity.
Oh, sorry, I had that already. And always to be reminded, as we are in our esoteric healing practice, of the close relation between the 7 major centers and the 7 major glands of the physical system. I'm going to skip down because by a specific polarization of the soul in incarnation, and by the rays of the personality and soul of the man. So think about your own rays, but we also need to think about the rays of our nations and the rays of the planetary logos, the rays of humanity in the planetary logos, first ray and second ray, and how these are determined by certain ray forces. So my use of that visual, I took it out, but you can see it in an early essentials, the uniquenesses. Go back and review that and look at it if you have questions about the importance of the glands and the centers relating to the rays in your own system. The centers have these functions. First, vitalize the physical body. Second, develop the self-consciousness in man. And third, transmit spiritual energy and sweep the entire man into the state of spiritual being. for a group to vitalize the group physical body in group service, to bring about the development of self-consciousness in the group, and to transmit spiritual energy and sweep the entire group into a state of spiritual being. And the question is the group will in any ashram or master's group present in any form vital enough to condition the group relations and to unite its members into a band of brothers moving forward into the light? Is the spiritual will of the individual personalities of such strength that it negates the personality relation and leads to spiritual recognition, spiritual interplay, and spiritual relation? It is only in consideration of these fundamental effects of standing as a group in the head's clear light that it is permissible for disciples to bring into the picture personal sensitivities and thought, and this only because of a group temporary limitation. If you listened to the new process that the 2025 initiative is doing, the relation between 2025 and the Hekal group, you can get a sense of what, in my estimation, appears to be the development of this demand by DK for true group worth and true group service. So we need to look at our own groups and consider how we can do this. And for humanity to vitalize the physical body of humanity, the brain of the Logos, to bring about the development of self-consciousness in humanity and to transmit spiritual energy and sweep humanity into a state of spiritual being. Just a reminder again, DK says this all embodies a teaching and a theory. It has to be wrought out in physical, practical experiment and experience and the conscious activity of the aspirant. So we know ourselves, we know thyself, know thyself. Proceed slowly and with caution, study effects, cultivate the realization that eternity is long and that which is slowly built up endures forever. If we look at the fifth root race, fifth sub-race, take heart. We'll all be back together again and aim at regularity.
May the holy ones, whose disciple I am, show me the light I seek. Give me the strong aid of their compassion and their wisdom. There is a peace which passeth understanding. It abides in the hearts of those who live in the eternal. There is a power which maketh all things new. It lives and moves in those who know the self as one. May that peace brood over us, that power uplift us, till we stand where the one initiator is invoked, till we see his star shine forth.
Please feel free to share any of these teachings with those you're working with, and let us endeavor to practice DK's advice to still the mind. And as we're encountering those activities that flood the mind in any setting, still the mind by the use of the Om. Move the consciousness to the highest point and allow the soul to control the outer form and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate, and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love. And let's close the recording.